They have accounted for a relatively very small proportion of deaths. Now, that doesn't mean that they haven't accounted for somewhere between, let's say, 150 and 250,000 deaths, which under any other circumstance would be simply mind-boggling. It gives you a sense of just how horrible the sectarian warfare has been. But when the United States has accounted for somewhere between, if we take 1 million as the figure, and we passed 1 million a long time ago, somewhere between 600 and 700,000 deaths, you get a sense of the magnitude of the slaughter there. This is just something that has been completely blacked out of the American media. And in fact, the article that I wrote about this a year ago has just been nominated for a Project Censor Award because it's just this totally surprising, just amazing blackout. One which, by the way, is not shared by the rest of the world. I mean, in many places in the world, these numbers are understood and just absorbed as sort of part of the real situation. It's frightening, but to add another note to this, I think we need to understand that once we realize that 1 million Iraqis have died, that 4 million to 5 million Iraqis have been rendered homeless and dislocated, that another 4 million on top of those are being supported at a level that can't sustain human life over the long run. If they don't get more food and more sustenance soon, major health problems will arise, and of course for lots of them they're already arising. So we're talking about close to 10 million of a 27 million population are definitively in danger, have been rendered destitute, and the rest of the population is in not much better shape. This is the damage that has been done by this war to this country, and yet they haven't stopped fighting the American occupation.
Right.
They
now,
continue
I want to
miraculously.
Hang on there, Michael, because I want to ask you all about, and this is really the emphasis in your article. But before we get there, I want to stay focused here a little bit on just how much America has destroyed that society. When you said, what was it, 50% of people thought that less than 9,000 Iraqis had died?
Yeah.
To go along with that, obviously, if they think only 9,000 Iraqis have died, then there's a whole hell of a lot that they don't understand about the situation in Iraq. I want to make sure that people understand, as per your best description, just exactly what kind of destruction has been rendered unto that society in terms of the different factions of Christians, the Yazidis and the Turkmen and the other ethnic minorities there that nobody talks about at all, in terms of the 4 million refugees, in terms of the economy, the unemployment rate, the electricity, the water. America has basically taken Iraq and slammed it up against the wall, just like in the Ladin Doctrine, right?
Yeah, well, it's, the actual destruction, physical and personal destruction in Iraq is beyond, I think, people's imagination, and certainly the American people have been fully insulated from any sense that this is going on. And when I, talk to people about this and I start giving them some sense of what's going on in Iraq, they say, "Gee, I had no idea that this is going on." And of course, if they did, there would be much more outrage by the war. I mean, it's very hard in a short period of time to describe just how horrible things are. But let me just give 2 examples that have been in the news in the last few days. One is, let's take the Battle of Basra, in which, a group of Iraqi troops were sent into Basra and were immediately pushed back to conquer various areas of the city that were held by Muqtada al-Sadr's group, the Sadrists, the Mahdi's army, right? And so in order to rescue these Iraqi troops that were in danger, the United States unleashed its normal air power. Now, the air war is highly destructive. I mean, all air wars are highly destructive, and we know this all going back to World War II. In Iraq, what the air war did in Fallujah was result, along with artillery, air and artillery basically, resulted in the destruction of 70% of the buildings in the city. 70% need to be rebuilt, and the other 30% are heavily damaged, often by the fact that the way American soldiers enter buildings when they're on the ground is by throwing hand grenades into the front door. and blowing up the place room by room. So the strategy of the war is itself immensely destructive. These 2,000-pound bombs will take out 6 or 7 fairly substantial buildings with one bomb. So if you're targeting a building where, let's say, there's a sniper and you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on it, you wipe out the surrounding buildings, including the people who are in it, right? So you get high levels of destruction and high levels of death and high levels of mayhem and high levels of injury and amputation and all of the really serious injuries that come from war. This is the way they're conducting the war. So in Basra, when the Iraqi troops who are lightly armed, fortunately from the point of view of the residents of these communities, right, were failing, then what happened was you brought in the U.S. artillery, you brought in tanks, and you brought in the most lethal of all the air power, right? And so certain sectors of Basra have now been reduced to look quite a bit like Fallujah, which is a rubbleized city, right? So that's one piece of the news that, you know, I think we should keep in mind. Now, another piece of the recent news is this offensive in Sadr City. And one of the big features of the offensive is that the United States is building a wall to cordon off a section of Sadr City that American troops entered into. And they built this wall. It's 12-feet concrete walls, and these concrete walls are all over Iraq. They're mostly in Baghdad, but they've spread from Baghdad to the rest of Iraq. And Baghdad has been separated into these tiny enclaves, you know, of a few thousand people surrounded by walls, right?
Like
and
in the
then
West
there are
Bank.
certain breaks in the walls that are manned by checkpoints, and people can or can't go in and out depending on whether they have permission. Now, one of the things that's never mentioned, the U.S. has the nerve to call these walled-in areas gated cities, right, as though they are the equivalent of the richest areas in American cities, right? Now, in fact, what these walls do is they absolutely annihilate the social, economic, and political life of the areas that are surrounded. These people are no longer have a viable life because, for example, the children have to go to school in an area beyond the wall. They can't get there. People who work have to go to work beyond an area of the wall. They can't get there. They have to go through the checkpoints, which sometimes take hours and in any case are not well located. And besides that, it's now become totally dangerous. So, and the employers cannot get their workers there. Shops, stores, manufacturing establishments cannot function. They don't even have electricity, right, because they can't get either employees or customers or both. Food has great difficulty getting into these areas. They're highly unstable economically, politically, and socially. People can't visit their relatives. They can't get to the doctor. They can't do anything. What you have is a type of prison. And it's not just a type of prison, but it's a type of prison that can't really be effectively supplied with what it needs to sustain life. So the people there are declining economically as time goes on. And this is what the success of the so-called surge is about, right, is that what we've done is we've created these enclaves in which people are slowly becoming more and more and more miserable. And, of course, what people do in that situation is they take drastic action to save their families. The most common drastic action is to leave. So the building of these walls in Baghdad has been one of the key elements, along with all the fighting that has been accompanied it, right? The fact that in Baghdad lost 1 million people. 1 million people were dislocated in the year 2007 in Baghdad. 1 million people out of a 4 million person community. The rest of them are not living a viable existence. This cannot go on like this, right? So then you get further rebellion, which is what happens. You get further protest of various sorts, and you get people dying and being miserable, silently suffering, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what this wall that's getting built in Sadr City. And what are the Sadrists doing? The Mahdi's army, they're blowing up the wall, right? They're trying to blow up the wall because they understand what the consequences of the wall are. Right.
Well, that's and what the purpose of the wall is, right? I mean, this is the West Bank model for how to ruin people and conquer them forever.
Right. Well, a lot of people. There's no question that. I mean, there's lots and lots of coverage now that the United States has consulted at great length with the Israelis about all sorts of matters of strategy, and it's impossible to believe that they didn't get the idea for the walls from the Israelis.